This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area. Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Quiet on the set. Soon we will all be more informed.
We appreciate learning more of our region's news and public affairs. Cameras rolling.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, we saw two political chief executives reacting to situations in totally different ways this week. A governor being perhaps too aggressive and a mayor being perhaps too reclusive. We will look at the governor's challenging attention to the city's Sewerage and Water Board and at traditional tensions between mayors and the press. We'll also look at the latest from two courts of different types, including plans to redistrict the state Supreme Court, and Carnival, where krewes and courts will be undergoing a procedural checkup. Riding with us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources from Baton Rouge, David Jacobs, senior state affairs reporter, La Politics Weekly, and Ben Myers, a staff writer for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go on over to David now. And Governor Landry has really set an agenda, an aggressive agenda, and things are moving along rapidly as they did in the special sessions. How's a regular session looking for him?
Well, the regular session is as I talked about last time I was here, it's a lot more complicated. It's not like in a special session where the governor can literally set the agenda.
Right.
He can limit what people can discuss. You know, in a regular session, a lot of bills are flying around, and they've got to kind of pick and choose about where they're going to, put their influence. But so far, so good from their perspective. I mean, they're getting most of what they want. The bills that they like are mostly getting through. Things that they wouldn't like are mostly not getting through. But we're still early. There's still lots of time to see how this goes.
By they, you mean the Landry administration?
The Landry administration.
So what are some of the things then that he has been successful in getting through, would you say?
Well, nothing's gotten through yet, but most of what you're seeing is, for example, the things that the business lobby is in favor of in terms of things like insurance and focus on insurance. Yeah. Most of that stuff is getting through. There is some. Actually, it's interesting because on insurance, there is some question about whether the governor is fully with the business lobby on everything. There is some thought that some of these bills could potentially be watered down. What the insiders will tell you is that yes, we think our bills will get through, and yes, we think the governor will probably sign them. But what condition will they be in when they get to his desk? Yeah. That's a little inside baseball. That's one of the things that's being discussed inside the rails. The big ask so far is the Constitutional Convention. That is something where the legislative leaders, they're a little lukewarm. They're not against it. Some of them have come out in favor generally of the concept. But it's,
well, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
Tell us what that concept is. What does the governor want to see happen regarding a constitutional convention?
So basically the idea is that, and I don't know how deep you want to get, but basically the Constitution is too long, it's too unwieldy, it's been amended 200 plus times, and a lot of things, a lot of the money is tied up where more than half of it is already spent when the lawmakers get to Baton Rouge. So the idea is that you take some of this stuff out of the Constitution, put it in statute, then it's easier to change. So that gives the governor and that gives the lawmakers as well more flexibility in how they spend that money.
Well, what's the timeline? What does the governor want to see happen in terms of time?
So the original idea was the session is scheduled to end on June 3rd. The original idea is we're going to wrap up early on May 20th, and we're going to take that period between May 20th and June 3rd, and that's going to be the Constitutional Convention. Well, apparently they decided that's a little too ambitious for a timeline to rewrite the state's fundamental document. Yeah. So the legislation, as was actually filed, pushes it out to July 15th. That's going to be a hard sell to the legislators to have to stick around until July 15th. These people have jobs at home, they have families, they have businesses to run. By June, they're going to be sick of each other, basically.
If not already.
If not already. I mean, they've had 2 special sessions already.
Right.
They've been in Baton Rouge more than they've been home.
I remember when that Constitution was passed, that people could run for delegate positions.
Right.
In addition to the legislature. Are there going to be a special elected delegates, or is it just the legislature?
It's the legislature and 27 appointments from the governor, according to the legislation, which, by the way, we don't know who that's going to be yet.
Okay.
And you can imagine the jockeying behind the scenes to try to get one of those spots. And it's interesting because, so you've essentially going to have legislators plus the governor's appointees. You would have 171 delegates to this constitutional convention, which presents some practical concerns of just where you're actually going to physically meet. But also, I mean, look at it from the standpoint of a state senator. If you're in the Senate, you're used to being an equal branch of government with the House and with the executive branch. Now you're just 39 votes out of 171. Mm-hmm. You're going to feel like your power is very weighted down.
Yeah, it's all a very complex thing.
Yes.
So what's the status of this legislation?
So it's only recently been introduced. It hasn't really started debating it yet. Okay. It is, like any other instrument, it can be amended through the process, and you're going to have to get 2/3 of the legislators on board to get it established. And then, of course, the voters would have to decide, on
in November. That's if we went
fall,
along
yes.
the governor's timeline, then the voters would be deciding on this document that was crafted in this short amount of time over the summer in November.
This fall, yes.
That's a lot to accomplish.
It is a lot, and what they would hope to do, at least the sponsor of the legislation, as he related to me, what they would hope to do is just take big swaths of the Constitution, strip it out of the Constitution, and put it in statute. That way it's easier to change. You can come back next year, and nothing changes right away. Mm-hmm. So you could still work out the details later. But the idea of a limited constitutional convention has never been tested in court. So will it be able to keep it limited?
So a lot remains to be
Yes.
seen. All right, David, thanks a lot. All right, Ben, over on to you. The mayor, well, the governor has been really pretty public and, been forceful about what he wants to see happen legislatively. We now have the mayor of the city of New Orleans kind of going behind the scenes. I mean, we're just not seeing her that much anymore.
The governor was just elected. The mayor's been in office for 6 years, more than 6 years, and she's kind of winding down now. There's clearly been a shift in her strategy for communicating with the public. For about 2 years or so, she was doing weekly press briefings, and she was, beyond that, she was showing up, like she was ubiquitous across the city, showing up for groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, etc., or just to announce an administrative initiative. She seemed to really like doing this in person and wanted the press there, even if there was a sometimes combative relationship. She has a take-charge personality, and she seemed to enjoy filling that role, or being that take-charge personality. Somewhere around the start of the year, the weekly press briefings just stopped, and there have been fewer and fewer chances for her to be questioned by the press, either in these other kinds of events or not. I mean, she's still showing up to some events. Her presence will be advertised at some events, but they're usually events put on by other people, or it's part of some bigger, wider initiative like the Super Bowl committee or something like that. So we're not really seeing or hearing from her much at all these days. I think that she is still going to places for events without the press, where she'll go to schools or do other kind of ceremonial things. But often these are like announced after the fact, after they've already happened.
Because we're just talking about the governor and what he's attempting to do in the legislature, and some of it involves the city of New Orleans. We're not really hearing the mayor speak about this.
She's making very few comments about the governor's initiatives or anything for that matter. One thing she did state clearly is that she was opposed to some of the crime legislation that passed, particularly the concealed carry measure. But that's about it. I mean, we haven't heard from her at all on the Sewerage and Water Board or anything like that.
So a change in strategy, and while maybe she's not going to these weekly press conferences to answer the questions presented by the media, she is doing something that's going out digitally, right?
Well, she announced she's launched a podcast. They had their first episode. It was filmed at the Dewdrop Inn, or presented at the Dewdrop Inn. She had some guests, some other influential women from the city. It was moderated by one of her communications staffers. According to my colleague Sophie Casaco's reporting, there wasn't much of substance discussed in terms of city policy or anything really happening with the city. It was sort of more of a lifestyle type discussion. And it's also worth noting that we don't know when the next episode is going to be, what future topics are going to be.
So the mayor says this is her effort to keep the community aware of all of the achievements.
Yeah, I mean, she foreshadowed this in her State of the City address when she alluded to a very controversial flyer that was sent out, kind of touting her achievements that was orchestrated by her former communications director. She sort of brushed aside the controversy with that. The whole controversy was that it was city money creating this promotional type of, almost like a political advertisement. And she, at her State of the City, said, that was a legit communications with our constituents, and you're going to see more of that this year. So I'm kind of wondering or thinking that this podcast is what she was referring to.
Oh, okay. But in this podcast, there's no media involved at all in this. In other words, there will be no questions presented to her by the media.
Well, it wasn't in the first episode. Again, there's nothing's been disclosed about any second episode or what's going to happen in the future with it. So I don't know.
And where can you find them? These podcasts, the one that exists so far.
On all of the mayor's official social media accounts and on the city's official accounts. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think this is going to be something you're going to see citizens gathering around their laptop to listen to. I mean, it's a hard find, and it's a hard find. But she's had two really sensational investigations against her, which I'm sure hurt. Okay, one was about the travel expenses, and the other was about her apartment and the relationships. And both of them were very sophisticated investigations that went on, and I'm sure she's really been desensitized by all that.
I think that she conveys, I remember the State of the City speech, a sense of exhaustion with all the scrutiny, whether it's a council investigation or this ongoing FBI investigation, which we still don't really know much about, by the way. But so you kind of get the sense that it's all just kind of one big persecution against her, or at least that's what she's conveyed.
Okay, so the way to find the mayor these days, at least to hear what she has to say and maybe think, is through the podcast.
Apparently.
Okay, for the general public too.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot, Ben. And E, you wanted to talk about past relationships with mayors of the city of New Orleans and the media, not always very smooth and even.
Well, in general, in big city government, and we are comparatively, I guess, a smaller big city, but especially when you have a strong mayor form of government, and that we do have, where a mayor has a lot of discretion, and where you have a really active news media, which we have, you're going to have that tension. I mean, the media and the mayor aren't necessarily supposed to be friends. I mean, they have their job out there to do, and I think they've been very aggressive in doing it. And I was just thinking through like past mayors. I can't think of one that had a really friendly relationship with the press. I can think of some examples. Dutch Morial, who I think overall was a good mayor, had a good first term, ran for a second term, but had opposition. And I remember a press luncheon that he invited members of the press right after, like the week after he was elected to a second term. And you thought this was going to be a big kumbaya celebration. He was really furious. And what he was furious about was that he had to run for a second term. I mean, he was screaming at the press, saying, look at all the good things I did. I did all these things, and now, I had to run for a second term. Why is it me that I had to
run with opposition?
Yeah. And that really hurt him. The one example of the press really getting active in promoting a mayoral campaign was the election which Moon Landry won in 1969. The city was coming out of the doldrums, and the economy was bad. People moving to the suburbs, things looked bad. And there was a real effort on the part of the Picayune and I think Channel 4 to do this thing called City in Crisis. And they did every night. They did a series looking at these various issues. I mean, you're really trying to look. They sent reporters around the world. You know, here's what they're doing in Amsterdam, and they really went all out for it. And I think they had a lot to do with Landrieu being elected, and so he kind of owed that to him, I guess. But after that, the mayor and the press had a very, very contentious relationship.
It could be. I know. I sat through some of those press conferences with the mayor. I was just, a young reporter, and I would just be terrified and go over there. I'd beg the managing editor, please don't send me, send him. Because it was definitely he did not suffer fools, not at all.
There was one in particular, that Armstrong Park, which he developed, was a very, very hot issue. And the press is all over him. I mean, because the neighborhood was against it. Where are you going to get the funding? How are you going to do this? And they were all over him. And after the press conference was ending, a reporter raised her hand and says, yeah. And she says, where is Armstrong Park? Okay. and he was just
wouldn't want to be in our shoes for that.
And he says, out there, go see it. So.
Okay. All right, E. Thanks a lot. Ben, we're going to go back on over to you because something else that's, bubbling up in the legislature is the New Orleans Sewerage and Water Board. So what's going on? Where is it now?
It's
Do we
bubbling.
know? Does anybody know?
So there are some pieces of legislation that are moving. They have to do with the Sewerage and Water Board's billing, which has been a long time misery for residents who have seen some sometimes comically inflated bills,
Right.
and with little recourse on how to fix those. And then another piece that's moving would consolidate the entire drainage system under the Sewerage and Water Board's control, which is not a controversial idea, and basically everybody agrees should happen, but previous efforts to make it
Talking
happen.
about like the storm drains, stuff like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying. So currently the Department of Public Works oversees storm drains and small pipes, while the Sewerage and Water Board has the pumps and the large canals and whatnot. And they've been bifurcated for more than 3 decades now. And this has been identified as one of the contributing factors to all the street flooding we get.
To problems. So also, there was a task force, and there's talk about changing the governance, shifting them around in the board, the actual board itself. Where does that stand?
It doesn't look like there's much in the way of changing the governance, at least for now. There is one pending bill that would create a receivership, like a 1-year receivership that would replace the current board. As far as I can tell, it doesn't have any support. So it doesn't look like that's going to go anywhere, at least that part of that bill. So I don't know, we'll see.
But the bottom line is, people here in the city of New Orleans who are paying these bills, they don't want to get sticker shock when they open up their bill. They're worried about the whole billing situation. And then anybody's in the city of New Orleans, when it rains, we're all worried about, is it going to flood and drainage.
Right.
So with what's happening in the legislature and with this task force, people want to know, are these problems going to be fixed? That's what they care about.
So a couple things. One is that the Sewerage and Water Board is currently undertaking a very significant project that would replace all of these old, outdated underground meters with automatic readers that are supposed to read your water usage in real time, and you have a dashboard that you can monitor it with. Other cities have been doing this for years. We're just behind the pack on that. And the Sewerage and Water Board has been saying, look, this is going to fix all of our billing problems. Just hang with us. And what lawmakers and city council members are saying is, okay, that's great. Hopefully it'll do what you're saying it's going to do, but that project's not supposed to be complete until 2026. And they're saying in the meantime, you've got all of these outstanding contested bills. You've got people who are still getting estimated bills that lead to more problems. You need to do something in the interim. And that's what is being focused on right now.
And also there's a money issue. If, the storm drains and that whole system is shifted back over to the Sewerage and Water Board, are they going to get funded for that?
Well, that's where the argument has been historically for years, and it could be again. A bill by Senator Jimmy Harris would force this consolidation to happen, but it doesn't really identify any new funding. Sewerage and Water Board says we want to take the system, but we need a funding commitment beforehand. Council members are saying you doing that system is part of your mission. And so you need to take it and agree to take it. And then, like every other agency, we'll talk about funding. I'm borrowing from Councilmember Morrell. That's what he said.
Okay. All right. Still a lot more action in the future for that then. Thanks a lot, Ben. All right, David, and over to you. Something else that's going through the legislature is redistricting of the Louisiana Supreme Court. Not talking congressional redistricting here, but the Supreme Court. That action was put on pause for a while, but it's back up. There's some legislation.
There are 3 bills, all on the Senate side. All 3 would create a second majority-minority district. So it's really just a matter of where you draw the lines. People can go online and see the maps. If you go to the legislature's website, you can see the maps. There are 2 of the maps that are actually scheduled for a vote on Monday. That doesn't mean they will be voted on, but they're scheduled for a vote. So they're still on the Senate side right now. There is one that's pretty much the same as the one that the governor and the attorney general backed, that the legislators on the Senate side shot down, which one of the very few times, by the way, where we have seen this legislature buck the governor. And it was since it was the Senate that bucked it last time, it was like, okay, so we'll start on the Senate side this time. Let the Senate figure out what map they can support and then send it over to the House.
But that is anticipated to happen during this regular session?
Yes, that's one of the must-pass items for this session.
So we don't really exactly know at this point what it'll look like, but we can expect for there to be another district so designated coming up. Okay. All right. We'll see where that goes then.
Yeah.
All right. Errol, you wanted to talk about Carnival, and there is a special meeting coming up this Monday. And
there were several issues that came up this past morning, as there are every Mardi Gras, and most of them were like issues of success about Carnival being so big, so many people, and overcrowding, that sort of thing. And so there was a feeling, and there was an incident in Mardi Gras Day where the Rex Parade got delayed, and part of it was because of Zulu, but it was really a compliment to Zulu's success because it draws such huge crowds that pushed back everything. So everybody's being very gentlemanly about this. Nobody's pointing fingers at anyone, but anybody's saying, we got to fix some things, maybe some of the parade routes and doing that. So there's always been a Mardi Gras Advisory Committee, which is mostly parade captains. But through the insistence of J.P. Morrell, they started something new called the Council Legislative Advisory Committee. And what they're going to do is they're having hearings. They have some council members on and various other members, and just trying to pinpoint some of the problems and figure out how to deal with them, perhaps legislatively. Some people say maybe we don't need a law. Maybe we just figure out what the problems are and fix them on our own. But there is a feeling that they need to do something. You have some, there was a time when parades were spread throughout the city, and then over the last decade or so, they kind of all went uptown because uptown's the more popular route. You can get more riders there. But when you have like that many parades uptown, like there are nights you got 3 parades of the parade, and when you have that kind of crowd, like that night of Muses, and you have 2 other parades that night, and so it's creating problems. But problems generated by the popularity of the whole thing, but problems that need to be dealt with.
So, I've heard discussion, in this past week too, and the question posed: has Mardi Gras gotten too big? It's almost a good problem to have it because of the fact that it is so popular. We have the locals going down to the uptown route to see the parades. We have the tourists coming in to see and enjoy all of Mardi Gras. Is that something that this committee will be dealing with?
It is, but I think the issue, part of the dilemma is that we're very unique in that our carnival is paid for by the participants. There are no commercial sponsors. Now, if you had commercial sponsors, you wouldn't need as many riders. You can just, and so you could have smaller parades, all right? Mm-hmm. But now you need participants to have that many people pay for the parades, and so what do you want, one thing or the other? And I don't know, I guess it has to be paced a little bit. I don't think we need any more tandem floats or those big triple-decker floats.
So what if there would be legislation? I mean, what kind of legislation would there be to limit the number of members in a crew, to limit the number of floats in a parade?
Yeah, but let me tell you, there have been laws in the past limiting the number of parades, and all it takes is one person to call their councilman. They say, look, man, we want to start a parade too. Council members are suckers, okay? When they're asked to expend Mardi Gras, there needs to be some kind of authority figure out there saying this is it. This is as far as we're going to go.
And then also, there is the issue of ladders and tents and people just marking off, property that they say is theirs for the duration of the Mardi Gras season, in St. Charles Avenue.
And that's another part of the problem.
The
because
neutral ground, is that going to be regulated, do you think? Any more than it is? And supposedly it is now, but
that's the creation that's created by the super crews like the Endymion and the Bacchuses. I mean, now parades are all-day events, and so people camp out and they bring their cool. Back in the old days, when you maybe had like 2 parades, each one lasted about a half hour. I mean, you weren't doing all that kind of stuff now. But now, and on the other hand, if the guy who loves cities, I love seeing it too. It's an urban festival. I love the idea of thousands of people out in a neutral space celebrating, but it is causing problems that have to be dealt with.
Okay, so that's Monday that this committee meets?
Yeah,
the first,
it's coming up,
and then how often will it meet? Do we know?
I think they're going to just decide where they go from there.
Okay, all righty, thanks a lot. And now we go to other stories.
Okay, this is a story you can never hear again, okay? Probably, so pay attention. The eclipse is coming up on Monday, okay?
Well, another 20 years.
Yeah, okay. RTA put out an announcement today reminding people not to stand near streetcar tracks during the eclipse because the streetcar might come in, or not to stand near where streetcars turn, okay? And so
that's good advice.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
And if you can't hear the streetcar, maybe you need to go to an audiologist or something, okay? but take special precautions about the streetcar.
All right. Now, we're not going to get the total eclipse here, but they say, partial. Also, unfortunately, I think it might be cloudy.
If you're not paying attention, don't take your chances.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, David, over to you.
Well, we mentioned redistricting a second ago at the Supreme Court level. The saga over the congressional map continues on Monday and Tuesday. There's a hearing with a 3-judge panel in a federal court in Shreveport over whether the map that they just created is also unconstitutional. Of course, that's Garrett Graves' district.
Right.
That kind of got chopped up, and he's now. He is certain, he said many times, that he does not think the new map is going to stand up in court. Basically, the court has 3 options. They can leave it as is, they can kick it back to the legislature, or they can draw a map themselves.
All righty, we'll see where that goes. Ben.
Green infrastructure projects that have been long delayed for many different reasons. Cantrell administration says these are going to be starting soon, so we'll see. They just got dinged by HUD and their OIG on that, so we'll see.
So the Marabou Gardens hasn't started yet? Still?
That has broken ground.
Okay.
But we'll see how it goes.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you again next week from Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
Public television is our passion. With so much content that WYES broadcasts and presents online, we are quite entertained and highly informed.
Please join us in supporting WYES.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.